Hey, what's up everyone? Brandon here from Truck Safe Consulting. If you're a carrier and you're not closely monitoring and tracking certain key safety-related metrics, you're placing your fleet at risk to enforcement in the form of more frequent roadside inspections and DOT audits. But more importantly than that, you're really opening yourself up to heightened exposure in the context of highway accident litigation. In this video, we're going to explore the top 5 safety metrics I believe that all regulated motor carriers should be watching and working to improve over time. So stay tuned, and if you're watching on YouTube, make sure you hit that subscribe button below to stay up to date on all of our new DOT related content. As you may or may not know, the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, which is the federal agency that regulates highway transportation, maintains a wealth of data concerning the safety performance of the nearly 600,000 motor carriers that it regulates throughout the country. This data gets filtered into various systems, many of which are publicly accessible. What's more, these systems are frequently used by the agency to prioritize carriers for enforcement, and also by the plaintiff's bar to paint motor carriers as bad actors in the context of highway accident litigation. They're also sometimes used by shippers and brokers to choose which carriers they want to do business with. So let's take a look at what I consider to be the top 5 safety metrics that carriers should be watching. Coming in at number 5 on the list is the Inspection Selection System, or ISS program, which the FMCSA and its state law enforcement partners use to target motor carriers' vehicles for roadside inspections. In essence, the ISS dictates how frequently a carrier's vehicles will be stopped for roadside inspections. The ISS scores carriers from 1 to 100, depending on their safety performance data such as roadside inspections violations. Carriers who perform poorly from a safety perspective will have a higher ISS score. Those with a score of between 75 and 100 are placed in the mandatory inspect category, meaning that law enforcement is encouraged to conduct roadside inspections of any vehicle bearing that carrier's US DOT number whenever possible, regardless of whether any unlawful behavior is observed roadside. Carriers with a score of between 50 and 74 are placed in the optional category, leaving it up to law enforcement whether or not to conduct roadside inspections. And carriers with a score of between 1 and 49 are in the pass category, meaning that law enforcement need not conduct a roadside inspection of the carrier's vehicles unless they physically observe some type of unlawful behavior. Because ISS scores dictate the frequency at which a carrier's vehicles and drivers are stopped for roadside inspections, they can have a tremendous impact on your productivity. If for no other reason than this, it's important that carriers regularly check their ISS scores and work to improve them. ISS scores are available through the carrier's portal and safety measurement system accounts. These scores are tied very closely to SMS scores, and carriers can generally improve both through better roadside performance. For example, fewer violations from roadside inspections. Next up on our list of top 5 enforcement metrics motor carriers should be tracking is the carrier's accident rate, which is expressed as the number of DOT recordable accidents the carrier has incurred per million miles traveled by its fleet. Now, as a preliminary matter, DOT recordable accidents are those that involve a fatality, an injury to any person that requires immediate medical attention away from the scene, or disabling damage to any vehicle that requires it to be towed away from the scene. A carrier's accident rate is important because the FMCSA considers it, along with any violations discovered during a compliance review, to calculate the carrier's safety rating. The industry average accident rate for motor carriers is 0.74 accidents per million miles. Now, according to the FMCSA safety rating methodology, a carrier with an accident rate of more than 1.5 accident per million miles for non-urban carriers, or 1.7 accidents per million miles for urban carriers over the course of a 12-month period will fail that portion of the audit, which could lead to a downgraded safety rating. To calculate a carrier's accident rate, the FMCSA will compare the number of DOT recordable accidents reported by the carrier on its accident register for the past 12 months to the mileage its fleet has traveled over that same time period, which is typically listed on the carrier's biennial MCS 150 filing. By way of example, if a carrier had 4 recordable accidents in 2019 and traveled a total of 2 million miles that year, its accident rate would be 2 accidents per million miles, which would cause it to fail the accident portion of the audit if it were selected for one. Carriers can improve their accident rate one of 2 ways: either increase their mileage and or decrease their accident frequency. To this end, carriers should familiarize themselves with the FMCSA's Crash Preventability Demonstration Program and should petition to remove from their account any accidents that are non-preventable on their driver's part. Doing so and keeping their mileage up to date will help improve their accident rate. Okay, so number 3 on our list of critical metrics carriers should be watching are their vehicle and driver out-of-service rates. These rates are publicly available on each carrier's USDOT registration profile online, and they indicate how frequently a carrier's vehicles and drivers are being placed out of service, for example, prohibited from operating for serious violations during roadside inspections. The SAFER system displays carrier out-of-service rates next to the applicable industry average. Higher than average out-of-service rates can lead to FMCSA audits and lost business. The key to improving out-of-service rates is to minimize the occurrence of significant roadside violations. Now, the Commercial Vehicle Safety Alliance, also known as CVSA, publishes its out-of-service criteria each year. And this out-of-service criteria dictates the types of violations that will result in drivers or vehicles being placed out of service roadside. Common examples include operating without a CDL when one is required and defective lighting devices. All right, coming in at number 2 on our list is the SMS system. Now, since 2010, the FMCSA has used its Compliance Safety Accountability, or CSA system, to prioritize federally regulated motor carriers for enforcement action. The Safety Measurement System, or SMS system, is one major component of CSA, and it ranks carriers against their peers in 7 categories known as the basics. A carrier's SMS scores are primarily a function of the number, type, and severity of regulatory violations uncovered during roadside inspections and/or compliance reviews. Carriers that perform worse than a certain percentage of their peers in the basic categories are placed higher on the FMCSA's prioritization list and are more likely to receive warning letters, fines, and compliance reviews. For this reason, and because poor SMS scores can also lead to increased insurance premiums and loss of business, it's imperative that carriers understand how their scores are calculated and consistently monitor and work to improve them. So that brings us to number 1 on our list of critical safety metrics, which is a carrier safety rating. A carrier safety fitness determination, also known as a safety rating, is an evaluation of its compliance with the FMCSA's safety fitness standards, which appear in Title 49 of the Code of Federal Regulations at Part 385. To meet those standards, motor carriers must demonstrate that they have adequate and effective safety management controls in place to comply with the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Regulations and the hazardous material regulations if applicable. Now, the FMCSA only issues safety ratings to carriers that have undergone a comprehensive on- or off-site compliance review. These audits are conducted by either the FMCSA or one of its state enforcement partners. Motor carriers, again, are prioritized for these audits based in part on their SMS scores. For carriers whose compliance the FMCSA has specifically evaluated through an on- or off-site audit, there are 3 possible safety ratings. The first is satisfactory, and it's the highest rating available, and it indicates that the carrier has adequate safety management controls in place to ensure that its operations are conducted in compliance with the safety regulations and the hazmat regulations. Next up is a conditional safety rating, which means that the carrier lacks adequate safety management controls to ensure compliance with the regulations, and this non-compliance could result in one or more of the safety fitness standard issues that we've discussed previously. And lastly is an unsatisfactory rating. An unsatisfactory safety rating means that the carrier lacks adequate safety management controls to ensure compliance with the safety regulations, and that lack of compliance has resulted in one of the safety fitness standard issues that we've previously discussed. Now, carriers who receive an unsatisfactory rating following an audit will receive an operational out-of-service order, sidelining their entire fleet. And although the carriers that receive a conditional rating can continue to operate, many shippers and brokers refuse to do business with a conditionally rated carrier. So to wrap things up here, with so many industry stakeholders scrutinizing carrier safety metrics, there's really no excuse for carriers to not monitor those metrics themselves. These metrics play a major role in the carrier's susceptibility to enforcement and heightened exposure in highway accident litigation. For more in-depth discussions of the federal safety regulations and enforcement programs, be sure to check out our comprehensive online safety manager course available at trucksafeacademy.com. And if you need help improving your safety scores and data, feel free to reach out to us. And be sure to follow us on social media where we regularly post compliance-related content. Thanks for watching.